Hello? So, but like I said, I mean, tomorrow's Friday, we want to, I'll be going back tomorrow or then. Okay, but recycling is definitely off the list here. The not doing recycling. So,
Mike, this is the accessibles.
yes, it's this.
That's nice.
Yes. So you move the chair out of the chair.
I took a chair from there.
Yeah, you put it on that side.
So, yeah, so I mean, we're gonna have the candidates sit in the front row and, I'm pretty sure these will be turned over so that obviously the audience can interact with them, but, you know, it's all legit. Yeah.
I mean, is there anything else we should know? I got all at college. I know that was just
Right,
any changes really.
no changes from the email beside the room location, this room just holds more people, I mean, actually, this is probably the I'm sorry, this is moderators and they will sit here. And, no rule updates or anything crazy.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else I should know?
Well, there was the option for a private room if he gets here early, or you can leave right here.
Yeah, okay. Where to be here?
Well, I have to be sure, because I know there's two different ones.
Absolutely. Yes. It's cities too.
I mean, he went here, right? Yeah. Did you go here?
Well, I'm from
Maryland.
so.
Iconic. I'm not from here either.
I guess he went here and stayed here.
Room 113. I can show you where it's a little, it's a small little room. It's no problem.
So, yeah. It's a house fund that basically, but it basically, it's like this last, it's someone. It's just really. Yeah, I think it's a lot of them go on inside, but it never really. So. I would say like. Yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, that sounds like something I definitely. Yeah. Even if I were able to. But you need those specific class. I would say so. Yeah. And it's supposed to be interesting. Yeah.
Alright, yeah, undergrad from. I'm a 3L here. Yeah, I'm in charge of the Yale.
Yeah.
This your first year?
Yeah.
In charge of the YLDems?
Yeah, everybody always only gets to do it for a year. This is our first event.
First year, first event.
Just come together all in just like the past 3 weeks.
Congrats on making it this far.
Yeah, it's been a real struggle just trying to get,
Yeah.
like you, it's pretty ridiculous that you have to like have a name checked off and you want.
So you should, so either I will ask or you can say it up front. That's pretty crazy. It does, I appreciate you pushing the stream, that's great, but. Yeah, well, it's not, I'm sure you got a lot of questions about.
Yeah, but we also
About that.
have a, like, Dean Mike is gonna be like standing right there.
For what? Who's team?
He's the Mike Thompson. He
Oh.
is just like responsible for the building, it's like the measure the laws. Anything you wanna do. And you just met Heather Gerken, who's like the dean of the law school. But she has like normal responsibilities in the charter school. Mike is like the COO.
And what's its relevance for whether or not this is a.
They're just all these policies, like, I think the institution is far bigger than any one person, any one student group, any one year. And they just like work extremely hard to like safeguard, whether that's good or bad. And so I think.
That's it, totally, it's crazy, I mean, I have no idea how many people here even registered to vote in New Haven, I mean, I feel like these are the two most consequential people. Anyway, I don't wanna get the spiel, but I do think that this is classic open to the public thing, and I very much appreciate you explaining them to.
We I have like written down some remarks that I'm gonna make. address that.
Stop trying to give you a hard time. but
No, no, no,
think it's
I completely agree, and I super,
clear.
I value everything you push to that. Yeah, we are, one thing, Yale college.
It's in here too. Interesting.
You don't like that?
Oh, it's great. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Yale College Democrats are committed.
They're going to try one. We are also.
Got it. As if you were studious of the. Okay. So I read that happens. I really think that this should.
But right now, we are.
Like what, where are you from?
From New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot of, you don't expect to be problems. Like I reached out. So, hey, would it be all right to, or can you guys release the questions? It's not all. What?
Who's they? Not like university. Most people or something, or like who is it?
Well, that specifically was. Hi, Anika.
Thanks, how are you?
Doing well.
How's it going? It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Pleasure.
Yeah,
We're gonna be pretty snug over there.
is that all right?
Maybe we can get up and
Seems to be
switch it.
fine.
No, I just haven't, just keep watching.
Before we were gonna be in one twenty and you're all gonna be on stage, I just thought that was weird.
Whatever, let's do the thing, it's fine.
Would you prefer to be on the side? Is that more natural?
No, I just was not expecting this setup, but that doesn't mean it's bad.
It might be more natural to be on the side. We're not like Mac and friends.
Like, I guess I'm not the tallest person, but I hope people can see it. Over our heads. I guess it's right there, but.
Okay, yeah, actually, that's a good.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll switch it over.
Okay.
Is that like too much on the sidelines?
I think so. No, that's fine.
Ryan?
Vice President.
Oh, yes, thank you.
What else are you doing?
I understand.
Good. How are you?
It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, how was this?
It's good. Still feel like it's starting. Not yet. See them starting yet. All on their pot, you know. But
Excellent.
Yeah.
Like, quick question about. You're teaching in classroom and clinic?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
technically allowed.
yeah.
There's a conditional.
Five.
Like you have both teaching, maybe that's all right now.
Yeah, that's the way we
to.
do it. Yeah,
practice
that's
our
the way, right, exactly, they go hand in hand, right, so when I'm on leave, I don't have either,
Also,
which is,
once.
that's on the last.
That's the art.
And when I'm here. It was good, but I came back really good back. Like more like because how much is client work is just. Yeah.
Hi. Hey, how are you? Doing well, on stage. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Good, thanks for having me.
Hi, Sean.
Yeah, you came to a YLDems meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, it was fun, like, it was,
Yeah.
good, good.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of,
Do you
visiting.
subscribe to like the Chili cases?
Yes, yeah.
9 o'clock, that's why I mean. I wonder what happened.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Right.
Met me,
Sometimes I
met me outside, got some security, no major issues.
Do you know moderate?
How are you?
I share your fear.
See ya.
Hi.
Meet your first to meet you. Yeah, I saw. Doing really well.
I know, but
Yeah, we're good.
It was, I think a little bit of growing pains. Yeah. it's- There's.
Yeah.
My husband might feel like it's not today.
Excellent.
We.
no, but it's right.
Like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Are you Jacob? Yeah. Hey, Jacob. it's inherently like.
Yeah.
equivalent to TA, right?
I did the,
I did the, yes.
Two years.
I don't, to me, I could see like.
And it was 1 years ago. Okay, maybe.
Like there's something.
Oh, y'all are. Actually, yeah, actually. We did, I had to go once for that.
Right, so like.
And it would be interesting to see how.
Yeah, oh, it's very, yeah, we're.
It's just, at one point, I don't know if you know, or pick them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think we should do that. No, it's sweaty.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think it's worth it. I could wake up in the morning to 3 hours of school. In my time.
But then whenever.
What is food?
Yeah.
So they do. They should share. All right.
All right. All right.
He's like, this is.
Tell us where we are.
Yeah, this is for you.
Okay.
Why did I follow up?
It's taken like.
Anybody ever swing in here? I love the when like.
I didn't say it's fine.
You're gonna be able to.
Too many things.
Space.
Yeah.
How are you? Nice to see you.
How are you? It's nice to see you.
Thanks.
Moderators.
Thank you.
You can fold your class.
Oh, you are.
These are.
It's really, yeah. It's a lot of.
I was just playing. Do you want to go one and one? That's what I was asking. Do you have references for like? If you are asking.
Great.
Are you leader?
Yeah.
And they're all saying I'm gonna get back to
It's on your time.
Or all like signals, 30 seconds remaining. You guys, thank you. I should come up with one. I wanted to send a thing. I was like, over there. See. Thanks. I was here at like 11 last night, just trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
I heard that. Yes. That's on the first term. Like no. So I come in and I'm like just a little all the very things. Oh yeah. It's actually it's all there. Yeah. So yeah, just very much necessary. Yeah, yeah. I was all about that. Because I'm like, yeah. Tweedledee and yeah,
Well, we have to check. Wait,
oh, well.
but I think it'll be cool.
Seems fair.
Trying to see?
I'm gonna, it's following she was. Very excellent. Yeah, there you know what I mean. Yes. Oh, yes, right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello,
Can we call you Liam?
Yes,
You
please,
can call me again.
Okay, can I? As long as I'm oh, having and it's like, you're like, I feel great doing this. No, broke lots of line. It's like my cat was just. It's the problem is I know, yeah. It's one tiny bit, it's just. I am. That's what it was. Okay, that's fine. So now I'm gonna find my Take this in the same spot. What's up, man? How you doing? Yeah. It was great. I feel like I hate meeting. You know what I mean? And at the end, and I was kind of like, yeah, I think I'm gonna see for this year, and I not really think how great, you know what I mean? Yeah. They've got to. This is not.
Being mayoral.
It's less than 5 days. I think that's right. Hello, Fred.
Hardly got.
You know, Tom?
That's like. When I was contacted by people that told my parents to go to Montville, to go to get the new guy chance. Contrary and. I really learned the lessons about nature and generally.
Yes.
Hello, guys, we're gonna get started. By just a quick show of hands, who here plans or wants to like ask a question during the town hall section? Okay. Cool. So I think, yeah, we'll be good for now for keeping it 2 minutes. Okay, I'm Sage Mason. I'm the president of the Yale Democrats this year. I am required to read the following statement. This event publication solicitation is sponsored solely by the Yale Democrats without support or endorsement of Yale University. Yale University does not participate in political campaigns on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for public office. Also required to inform you that this is being recorded. Okay, the Yale Democrats have gotten a little bit of flack this past week because this event is not open to the public. And we agree that that is really unfortunate. We wanted as many people to be able to come as possible. Unfortunately, there are rules that the law school has, and they were simply unable to accommodate it, but we are taking lots of measures behind the scenes to make sure that this is as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And we were told no 3 times, and Dean Mike kindly reminded me this morning that this event was dead until he and Deborah Krosner resurrected it. So we're very grateful for them for letting this happen at all. Yeah, and I think this is just pretty cool. In less than 1 week, one of these guys is going to be unemployed, unless they decide to run in the general election as an independent, which would not be
Just,
unprecedented.
if I lose, I will still be employed till the end of the year.
Good. That's actually, I'm curious if you plan, if you don't win on Tuesday, if you would run in the general election as well. But we'll save that for a little bit. Yeah, and the other will be the mayor of the third largest city in the third smallest state, home to the third oldest institution of higher learning in the country. Even though Yale is tax exempt on its academic property, Yale is one of the top 3 taxpayers in New Haven. It is New Haven's biggest employer. Yale Health is Connecticut's largest healthcare system, and Yale owns approximately a quarter of all the property value in the city of New Haven. And so when we got a couple of questions that were submitted online that were like, why mayor and candidate are you coming to this like gated place that's not open to the public? I think it's clear that Yale is vital to New Haven, just as New Haven is vital to Yale. And the two institutions, the school and the city, are inexorably tied together. New Haven's success depends on Yale's success, and vice versa. And as a result, I think everybody here, even if you're not voting on Tuesday, is a stakeholder in that relationship and the success of the city. And so I think it matters to everybody here, and it matters to whoever's the mayor, what people at Yale think or want. And I think we all want what's best for the city that we're going to live in. Oh, and I also want to note that Yale Law School was founded by a mayor of New Haven, David Daggett. He was one of the first professors here in 1824. I think he was like the Kent professor of law. He's buried across the street at Grove Street Cemetery, and he is represented on the Yale Law School shield by the dog. Last year, there was an exhibit in the Yale Law Library about him. He was a terrible racist, and we hope you guys are better than him. Cool. I'm going to introduce the YLDems board. This is our first event of the year. We have Rosella Gabriel, who is our VP of Policy, Vice President of Policy. Victoria Marith. Where is Victoria? She's not here yet. She is our VP of Programming. Arib Siddiqui. Where's Arib? He is our VP of External Affairs. And Ben Friedman is out of town right now, but he's our VP of Elections. Want to thank the candidates for coming. I'm not going to introduce them because they're going to introduce themselves, and they have 1 minute each to do that. But thank you so much. I think this is awesome. And it's very cool to have everybody here this evening. Yeah, let's give them a quick minute. Also want to thank the university and the law school. Want to thank the Yale College Democrats for helping us out, specifically Josh Guo, who's sick and he couldn't be here, but he is the reason any undergrads are here, whoever you are. And now I'm going to introduce our moderators. Tom Breen is the editor of the New Haven Independent, a local nonprofit news site focused on all things New Haven. Thank you, Tom. We'll applaud when I'm done with all of the moderators. Though you would obviously get a very loud. Jacob Hacker is the Stanley Razor Professor of Political Science, the co-director of the Ludwig Program in Public Sector Leadership at Yale Law School, and an expert and a resident fellow of the Institution for Social and Policy Studies at Yale, an expert on American politics and policy. He is the author or co-author of more than half a dozen books, a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He received the Robert Ball Award of the National Academy of Social Science in 2020 and was inducted into the American Academy of Political and Social Science in 2021. He is the founding director of the Consortium on American Political Economy, and he co-chairs the American Political Economy section of the American Political Science Association. And Anika Singh Lemar is a clinical professor of law at Yale Law School. She and her students provide legal services to affordable housing developers, small businesses, community development financial institutions, farms and farmers markets, fair housing advocates, cooperatives, and neighborhood associations. They also represent tenants and homeowners facing involuntary displacement as a result of evictions, foreclosures, substandard housing conditions. She is currently a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institute and the editor-in-chief of the American Bar Association's Journal of Affordable Housing and Community Development Law. She has served on numerous boards of directors and state and local commissions, including currently the boards of directors of the Connecticut Bar Foundation and New Haven Bank, the State of Connecticut's Commission on Connecticut's Development and Future, and the City of New Haven's Affordable Housing Commission. So let's give it up for our moderator. Thank you. And I think if anybody here is interested in anything, oh, and I want to thank the Dems board from last year. Olu just walked in, he was the president last year. And I appreciate you trusting us, the board this year, with carrying on the responsibilities of leading this organization. Thank you, Olu. Yeah, and so if anybody here is interested in anything that anybody here does, I highly encourage you to reach out to them. Jacob and Anika have been really great to me personally, and I just met Tom, but he comes highly recommended. Very cool. And the mayor and Liam, Justin and Liam, as we agreed to refer to you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm sure, you know, I reached out to you and you came, so I assume you guys are accessible as well. Okay, I'm going to read some rules now so people here know what's going on. Each candidate will have 60 seconds for introductory statements determined by a coin toss. We're going to do the coin toss now. Winner of the coin toss decides whether or not they go first. Mayor, Justin, do you want heads or tails?
Heads.
I knew I was gonna mess up. Tails.
I'll go second.
Okay, cool,
I guess I have to do that. I'll go second.
cool. Okay, so the first segment of the conversations, moderators will take turns asking questions. We'll do that until 8 o'clock. Candidates will each get 2 minutes to respond. The candidate who speaks first will have 1 minute for rebuttal after the second candidate speaks. Candidates will receive a 30-second warning and a 10-second warning that their time is running out, and then moderators, you will cut them off. And the 30-second warning is going to be, and the 10-second warning is going to be.
All right.
And the cutoff warning is like, yeah. And then
Used
at
to people
8
just
o'clock,
being like, time, your time.
I can do that. At 8 o'clock, no matter where the moderator's questions are, we're going to switch to a town hall format in which anybody can just walk up and ask a question. And then the timing rules will be the same. If it seems like we're running out of time, maybe we cut the 2-minute answers to 1 minute and then 30 seconds for rebuttal. But I think we'll take it, we'll see what's necessary. And then the last 15 minutes are going to be, the moderators will each get to pick a question that was submitted in advance. And you guys will have time to answer that. And we'll try to get you out of here by as close to 8:30 as possible. Might go over by a couple minutes, but we respect that the candidates have stuff to do after this. Okay, I think that's it. I'll turn it over to the moderators now, and let's get going. Cool. Thank you all for coming as well.
Great. Thanks for putting this together, Sage. Thanks for making it happen. I think it's great to introduce lots of Yale students to very important people in our city. So we're gonna go and try something new. I think we start by opening remarks, right? So Justin.
And given that I lost the toss, so I know I got a minute, but we've got a lot of time. So I think there'll be other opportunities to kind of plant the seed for introductions, but it would be helpful really quickly to know about you all. How many of you are actually law students here? And how many are first year, second, third? Cool. And everyone else that's not a law student? Like not undergrads, some teachers, or a mix, but all Yale affiliated, right? Cool. This is a great opportunity, I think. The format I'm hopeful is actually going to be, and I'm not even introducing myself, and I'm just going to remember. But the format is one where I think it'll actually afford us time to get a little bit more in depth in a lot of the issues, because we've had God knows how many debates and haven't really been able to get in depth. I've been mayor for 4 years. I love this city. I went to the School of Forestry back then. Now it's the School of Environment, and did a joint degree program with the School of Management. There's lots of other things I could say, but my time is up for this round.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for having us. Thank you, Sage, for putting this together, and the law school Democrats. And thanks to our panelists for being here and agreeing to do this. I'm Brennan. I currently serve as the Inspector General in Hartford, which means I do investigations into police misconduct there in the city. I came here in 2004 to attend the law school, and I fell in love with New Haven, and I really wanted to stay here. And I've been here pretty much ever since then, except for a 3-year period. After I graduated, I went into the Department of Justice, and I had a 3-year commitment in DC. I was a federal prosecutor doing anti-corruption and financial fraud work for 11 years, 7.5 of them, most of them here in New Haven. Then I went to legal aid, where I did a lot of housing policy work at New Haven Legal Assistance, and I became the director of the Connecticut Veterans Legal Center, which is a legal aid that provides legal services to veterans recovering from homelessness and mental illness. My time is up, or is that the 10? That's the 10-second mark, 5-second mark. Okay. I think New Haven is fantastic. I fell in love with city government when here in law school at the time. I think we can do a lot more with the city as well. And so I'm running for mayor here. So I'm happy to be here with you all. Thank you.
All right. I guess we'll start. Thanks so much for having us. Thanks for having me. Thanks for Justin, Liam. I do have one more raise your hand poll for the group. Fringe. How many people here are actually registered voters in New Haven? Oh, I'm not cringing. Hooray. It's great.
Nice job, folks.
So since we're at Yale, let's start with the Yale question. Yale's president, Peter Salovey, stepping down at the end of this academic year after 10 years at the helm of the university. Justin, your administration struck a new deal with Yale that the alders approved last April that had a number of provisions, including Yale increasing its voluntary payments to the city by $10 million a year for 5 years, and then 2 in the 6th year. Kind of handing over design control of a stretch of High Street while the Yale retains ownership of it to try and make it a more pedestrian cyclist friendly spot, and phasing down of tax exemption for newly bought properties by Yale. Center for Inclusive Growth. So anyway, a time to think about town-gown relations. So I wonder if maybe Justin, you could start, and then Liam, what's working right now about town-gown relations? What needs to improve? And I wonder if you could think specifically around Yale's impact on housing in New Haven, jobs, transportation, and taxes. I know those are 4 big ones. So whatever, but those are the 4 that I'm most interested in hearing you think about. How are town-gown relations going, and what about those big buckets?
I have 2 minutes to answer all that. Just so one thing, I think you misspoke, but New Haven retains the ownership of the street. You said Yale, but you meant New Haven. So when I took over as mayor in 2020, it was a tough relationship with the university. I was calling on the university to significantly increase its contribution to the city. Historically, if you look at the graph of every year, what the university gives to the city voluntarily, it was $1 million, $2 million, and it slowly went up to most recently in 2020, $13 million annually. Because of the work of a lot of people around the city pushing, including a lot of people internally at Yale, New Haven Rising, Unite Here, and a lengthy negotiation between President Salovey and my team, Yale has dramatically increased its contribution to the city from $13 to $23 million annually. And in addition, as Tom said, we struck some other portions of the deal that would disincentivize or make it easier for Yale when they acquire properties to not have a significant impact on the city, because they would tear down the loss of tax revenue by continuing to pay taxes over time. Since that moment, the relationship has, I think, quite dramatically changed. And a lot of that is President Salovey's leadership and his interest in really pushing the university to be more of a good host community. There's a lot more that Yale can do, and I think that we need to work more to do. One of the portions of our negotiations was the creation of the Center for the Inclusive Growth. Yale has contributed $5 million to the creation of that center. We are interviewing applicants right now to lead that center. We were actually interviewing people just last week jointly. And I think that can help with the framework for a lot of the other issues that Tom referenced around jobs, around housing, around inclusive growth in the city, and that relationship between the university and the city to help everyone benefit in the city.
I'm just gonna ask to lean into the mic. Those mics are weaker.
Got it.
Gotcha. Okay, so just as a primer, is everybody familiar with the tax issues here with the university and the city? Basically, just as background, under both state constitutional law and federal tax law, all property owned by Yale here, except for commercial property, but university property is not taxable, as Sage was mentioning when we started this forum. Also, under state law, Connecticut towns can only raise revenue through property taxes. So general revenue can only be raised through property taxes. This is a very old situation that we have here, but when it was started, Yale was about a very small part of the property here in New Haven. Since then, the university has grown exponentially, and you raised housing, jobs, transportation, and taxes. I think taxes is the one that we think about the most and that affects us the most, because every time Yale expands and acquires a new piece of property, we lose taxable revenue here. And that creates a very tense relationship between the city and the university. So just a few weeks ago, the university acquired a $2 million property on Prospect Hill. I read the news. As someone who really cares about the city, who wants to see, the city grow, the city expand, I really don't want to care if Yale buys a new property. I want to be happy for the institution. But as someone who also thinks about what our city needs to be able to govern itself and to function, my heart sank, because that is another property that we are losing off the revenue rolls. And so this presents us with a strategic threat to our city government. We need to fundamentally, in the long term, change that relationship. We can't have the university, if any expansion of the university creates a strategic threat to the city, that's going to be not a mutually beneficial relationship. So I think one of the things that's been great, we have for years kept up the pressure. We need to keep keeping up the pressure, but we also need to look as a city government, be very aggressive in looking at new ways of revenue. And our campaign has been really working to put out ideas on how to have new ways of revenue. And I've got one more for you. I'll tell you later.
Justin, you have one moment.
To respond to or add to it. So what Liam said is true, that the university, when they acquire properties, because it's a nonprofit, they own the properties, and so it takes away the real estate taxes. This deal we struck helps address that by ensuring the university is going to pay 100% of those property tax in the first year, 90%, and so on. But what folks don't talk about a lot is that the state has a payment in lieu of taxes program, and that reimburses municipalities for lost revenue from nonprofits. And typically what happens is the university acquires a property and then builds something really, really expensive on it that we can't tax as a municipality. However, the payment in lieu of taxes structure from the state will actually significantly increase the amount that we get from the city, because it is based on the value of the property. So what we've effectively done is, in this gap period where Yale is building, help the city address the previous loss in taxes, while our payment in lieu of taxes payments goes up as the university develops.
Great. I'd like to continue in the same vein as Tom. So I used to joke that Yale was a hedge fund with an educational institution attached to it. And now I joke that Yale is a medical system with an educational institution attached. As you know, and as Sage noted, the healthcare market in New Haven and Connecticut as a whole has massively consolidated. In just the last few years, Yale has acquired 3 Connecticut hospitals, including, of course, Grace down the street. And it is currently seeking to acquire 3 more. Research done by our own Zach Cooper shows that hospital consolidation raises prices, and that the prices that Yale Health charges are among the highest in the state. There is also evidence that the consolidation of local hospital markets lowers wages in affected areas. So Justin and Liam, do you support Yale's acquisition of new hospitals? More broadly, what challenges and opportunities for the city do you see in these trends, and how do you plan to handle them as mayor going forward?
This is a really big and complicated question, Jacob. Am I going first because Liam went first last?
You're supposed to be.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Liam, do you agree this is a big and complicated?
I do agree that this is a big and complicated question, Jacob. And I do think, I think the issue that you're raising is such a big issue, and it applies to so much more than just the hospitals as well. We see a conglomeration in also the real estate market and other issues that are affecting New Haven in causing costs to go up. So I think it's something to really be concerned about. If I'm being all honest, it's not something I've really thought about and its effect on the city for long term, because the university is here. But as you see, as this conglomeration occurs and they expand out, a lot of the services that would often be in town are then spun out into the suburbs or other towns, and people who have to go get those services then have to also travel when those services were once here in the city. But one thing I also want to raise is that this expansion and the expansion that possibly occurs here in New Haven as well presents similar problems to what I was talking about with the tax revenue that we have. So these properties are untaxable, and I'm going to loop this back around to my third thing here, because then as Yale and these healthcare systems expand in other towns as well, all those properties that they own in the other cities are also untaxable. And those towns, and there's a number of cities that are in the same boat that we are facing similar problems with taxable property and the revenue that they can raise for their towns. And I think one of our long-term goals needs to be that we need to make clear to the university that it is in both of our interests. It is in the town's interest and other towns' interests, and in the university's interest, that towns and cities like New Haven and others have other ways to raise revenue than just property taxes, that they should be given the power to raise revenue through either sales and or income taxes. This will help cut down in that adversarial relationship. It will make New Haven and other towns stronger as well, put us in a better position, and put Yale and the hospitals in a better position too, because we won't have such an adversarial relationship. I see.
Okay. So a couple of things. First of all, the growth of the hospital and Yale New Haven Health in New Haven, there's a huge benefit to our economy here. And what we're seeing, the hospital and the medical school are quite integrated. We're seeing New Haven become a hub, one of the top 10 centers for bioscience and life science research. And that has driven a lot of the growth and development in the downtown area. And it makes us strategically, it gives a strategic advantage to the city, not only to add tax revenues, but to add jobs to the system. We have to make sure that with that growth, it's done inclusively, and in particular at-risk populations that have historically not had access to adequate health resources have that access. And so we have seen in New Haven, and the city has supported growth of our federally qualified health centers. We have 2 in New Haven, Fairhaven Health Clinic and Cornell Scott. Cornell Scott has added on a site that helps support people that are dealing with substance use disorder, and the city has been a real partner to help them expand. Fairhaven Health Clinic is expanding significantly as well, their services. I also partnered with many folks out there to advocate for undocumented residents at the state level to have access to the subsidized healthcare system, Husky, that we have. And we have seen a lot of progress on that front where children are eligible for that Husky, and we're pushing to have older individuals access that as well. The final thing I will say is that we need to lean into this to make sure our residents, particularly the most vulnerable, have access to jobs. And there are a lot of jobs that aren't just the PhD jobs in this sector, but there's a lot of jobs that are driven by lab technicians and health technicians. And so we are working to create programs that I can't get into because my time's up, to ensure that we have a high school that helps train people on these jobs, and other support for people to access the jobs that are growing in this sector.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I guess I got too close for that one. So I think what the mayor is talking about is that New Haven being based in a meds and eds economy, and that the meds and eds economy here is what's going to attract people here. And I think there is a lot of potential to that. But I do think one thing we are seeing both here at the local level in New Haven and around the country in our political system from top to bottom is that the system as it currently exists is not working for most people, and that we are rusty and creaky. And what you were talking about, Jacob, with the conglomeration causing a rise in prices is something we're seeing throughout the economy, both in, as I was mentioning earlier, but briefly, in the hospitals, in ownership, the speculative real estate market, and the commodification of housing. All of this conglomeration of power, economic power in certain owners presents a real threat and a real challenge to everyday residents. And I think we need leadership that is going to be clear about that and take that on at all levels.
Thank you.
Can I pivot a little bit and talk about housing predictably? Housing's become a hot topic, not just among those of us who have been dorkily interested in it for decades, but affordable housing and the housing quality crisis are very much alive in New Haven. The problems evolved over the years, and the city's housing agency, the Livable City Initiative, was founded and designed in the 90s at a time when the city was losing population. Property owners were literally abandoning properties, and the problem to be solved was one of blight and dilapidated, oftentimes abandoned housing. The agency evolved really in the early aughts when population started to stabilize, but nevertheless, the private market and the private housing market wanted nothing to do with building in New Haven. So the agency started developing more on its own. Today, 20 years later, the city is gaining population. It has become a magnet for real estate investors for a variety of reasons. And it strikes me that the time has come to reimagine the agency. How should LCI be reimagined, and how would you implement that vision on the ground? I've lost track of who's going first. Justin.
Yeah. So big picture, cities around the nation are facing a housing crisis right now. There's not enough affordable housing. We're seeing an increase in individuals experiencing homelessness. It's a real challenge, and there's a lot that we are doing to expand access to affordable housing. This question is specific to Livable Cities Initiative, which basically does two things. One is some development support for development of affordable housing, and then the other is accountability for landlords, inspections, and implementing a residential licensing program that ensures the goal is to ensure resident safety. And I think this is a really good question that we need to think about of, is it time to restructure the agency? And we have started talking about what might be a way to potentially restructure LCI. And there's ideas right now, but we have not formulated a specific plan on how we might restructure. But for example, the health department in other cities does some inspections, and we could put some of the inspection regime under the health department. We have dramatically increased the number of lead inspections to keep a lot more kids safe in our city and improve the electronification of records. A lot of the city's past records prior to me taking over were paper. And so one of the things that we have talked about is actually separating out the development portion of the Livable Cities Initiative under economic development, and then pulling out an inspections regime that wouldn't just be housing inspections, but also would be lead inspections and other things. I could talk on and on. I guess I get another minute after Liam, but I want to respect your time. Oh, okay. I think there's a lot more we can talk about here, but we should be really proud of the work that we have accomplished. We have dramatically increased the number of complaints to the Fair Rent Commission to reduce the amount of increases that people have seen in their rents. We have significantly increased the number of health inspectors and digitized the records. We've done over 8,000 housing inspections in last year alone. We bring absentee landlords to court quite regularly. We have more work to do here.
Thanks.
Okay, we have more work to do here, but we're making a lot of progress.
I think this is a great question. And I think the time is ripe to really rethink how we're addressing housing policy here in the city. What Anika was describing was the time when the city was contracting, and then we blighted a number of properties and tore down a number of properties. What often is not known in the public is that there are tons of properties that the city still owns from that time period, lots all around town, which can support housing, which are in city ownership. So when I was at New Haven Legal Assistance, we tried to get a full list from the city about the properties that they own to kind of look and present ideas about how we could have housing on these properties. The way, LCI kind of took this as a very, like an affront. They didn't know what we were doing. They were really wondering why does the public care about this? But this is publicly owned property that's also not being taxed, not being lived on, that can really serve some really important purposes. I think the time is right for LCI to focus just on inspections. We have an economic development department. They can do development. We do not need LCI to be doing development. We really need them to focus on inspections here and making sure that people here in New Haven are living in dignified conditions. We have 12 housing inspectors here in the city for upward to 50,000 units. That can't be done. Those 12 people cannot inspect those units. And when you have folks out in the public who are asking for inspections to happen, they never know when these inspections are going to come. We need to update this agency so that they put the list online so that folks have an idea and a realistic timeline when they're going to get their house inspected, so that then they can hold their landlords accountable for the conditions that they are living in. We need to expand the housing inspectors there. We proposed 30 new positions this year in the city budget. None of them were in housing inspections. That's a huge loss and a big oversight on what is needed for the city, and it's time for some real change.
Yeah, so I think we need to be real. We've got more work to do, but let's be clear. The request that I think was alluded to, that the city is not giving a list of properties, came how many years ago?
It was before your time.
Yeah. So let's be real. We're happy to give the list of the properties that are available. There are not that many properties. There's a lot of sliver lots. They're very small lots. We've actually reduced the minimum buildable lot size, so that more people can build on those lots, but there's not that many lots. So I don't think we want to paint things that way. You never know when the inspectors are going to come. That's just not true. We need more inspectors, and I think we all can acknowledge that. But at the same time, let's not paint things with a broad brush. Our inspectors are working very, very hard to help respond, to make sure that people have safe housing, and to paint things with a brush that says you never know when someone's going to show up is just not respectful to the work that the city employees are doing.
For so long in recent history in New Haven, the story of New Haven being a cash strapped has kind of predominated. We've never had enough money to accomplish what we want to or need to for the population who lives here. And in the past couple of years since the pandemic, we've just been flush with one-time cash, including $115 million through the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. Mayor Elicker, your administration has allocated a lot of that money, not all of it, but yes, probably 80 or 90, I think, has probably been allocated. A very small amount has actually been spent in relation to how much has been allocated. And it's been allocated to a hodgepodge of different initiatives. $8 million for a study, whether or not to create a new VOTEC school, a couple million for climate resiliency, $1 million for youth engagement programs. All the numbers add up to a lot, but they're in the grand scheme of 115, a little bit here, a little bit there, try out a whole bunch of things. Wonder if Elicker, Mayor Elicker, you could start, and then me and Brennan, what's working in how the city's spent ARPA money right now, and do you think that this strategy of relatively a little here, a little there was the right one, or given this is a once in a generation just flood of money that we got, should we thrown it all at something big, transformational, and seen a more immediate real impact to improve the lives of New Haveners right now?
Sure. So first of all, I think it's really important to underscore that we are not flush with money.
Just to enforce the rules, I believe it is.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If you guys can switch it. That's fine.
Okay.
I'm okay. I'm happy to go first. I'm also happy to whatever you want to do. Okay, no problem. I mean, what I think this is emblematic of, like a kind of lack of mission for the city right now. I think there are a few there's a lot that we need to do. The city is still going to be like cash strapped in the future, but I do think we could have used this money to really like invest in climate resiliency and upgrading our infrastructure citywide, and our schools. So this week, I don't know if any of you out here know that our students were sent home because there is not sufficient air conditioning in all of the buildings around town. So they had half days for the last 2 days because a number of the HVAC systems broke in our school system. our students right now are like behind in reading, they're behind in math, and now we have just lost significant portions of the school day for the 2 days in a row because we don't have facilities that are up to snuff. This was a perfect opportunity to invest in a vision of having like school facilities that are ready. This is a huge problem, and it's something that we need to address. Secondly, housing. I think reforming our zoning code, investing directly in housing, investing in more inspections on everything that we know is the pressing issue right now. We could have like really focused this money on those items and had a kind of transformational effect on our city that we are losing.
It's really important to underscore that we are still cash strapped when you compare us with our suburban partners, and we should be spending way more than approximately $15,000 per student in our schools compared to New Canaan that's spending more than $20,000 in our schools. So I think that like a lot of you are new to New Haven. New Haven, we have an equity problem in Connecticut. At the same time, we were deeply fortunate to have, like many cities around the nation, an influx of cash in ARPA. We had an extensive community engagement process where we had many community meetings, asked the community, what do you want to see with this funding? And we could have made a choice. Let's put it all on housing. But overwhelmingly, the community wanted housing and climate and issues around public safety, improving public safety, and many other issues. And that's why we did a mixture. We didn't put a couple $1 million into climate. We put $5 million into climate so that we could create a climate office that is staffed and is now implementing a lot of our different climate initiatives. We didn't put a couple $1 million into youth. We have put millions of dollars into youth, $3 million into an after-school tutoring program to help our kids bounce back from COVID and improve their test scores. We have put a lot into youth activities and creating youth and community centers around the city. Housing, we've put tens of millions of dollars into housing. The Board of Alders just approved a few months ago an additional tranche of money to add significantly to the amount of affordable housing stock in the city. Our goal with all of the money that we have spent is to make that money last longer than the 5 years that we have to spend it. And so the goal is to invest in an entrepreneurial program so that lasts, the impact of that lasts many, many more years. To invest in tutoring so it puts our kids in a better trajectory so the impact lasts many, many more years. We want to invest that funding in things that are going to last for a long time so that we don't end up just spending it and then in several years not feeling that impact, the positive impact from the funding.
Personally, I hear all that. I think that what we are suffering from is kind of the hodgepodge approach that Tom, you were describing. And I think it's something that I think we really need to think about at our local government level. I think this is something we also saw in the transition report when Justin, you took office here. There was like a lot of great ideas. They're all really, really great ideas. But if we don't focus, we won't make the really big systemic changes that we need to make. And I think the ones that confront us as a city are related to education, related to housing, and related to how we think about and how we do public safety in the city. And that includes housing, that includes the health and wellness of our community. And so I know my time is almost up, but I just think if we had invested more in the creation of housing and in reforming our zoning code, we could create more taxable property as well in the city, which would sustain us longer in the long term.
Can I respond? I mean, he's making allegations about.
You can respond to the next question.
Okay.
Well, I was thinking of taking us in another direction, but now I'm actually thinking that we should stay on this topic. And so let me ask a question different than I was going to ask. It's actually to stay on this topic, and I'd love to hear your response, Justin, but to think about this fundamental issue about the place of New Haven within Connecticut's fiscal landscape or on Connecticut's fiscal landscape. So I've lived in New Haven since the mid-1990s, and the transformation for the good has been remarkable. The one thing that hasn't changed is that Connecticut is a state that is basically governed by 160 or something towns that have enormous capacity to protect their economic and fiscal resources. The term opportunity hoarding comes to mind, and the places that have more challenges with achieving that opportunity are the places that have been disadvantaged by this structure. So I want to ask a question that is both focused on what you're doing or will do within New Haven, but also thinking about this larger landscape. What is realistic to envision that could be done to rebalance the relationship between affluent towns, let's say mostly white affluent towns, and diverse and often struggling cities within Connecticut? What can the mayor do in this, in addressing this challenge, and who might the mayor partner with in doing that? So, and Justin, you should feel free to return back to the.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess New Haven should be a place where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, and everyone does not currently have the opportunity to thrive. And that is our focus, that is our goal, and everything we do is laser targeted on that. And it's easy to say, oh, I would spend the money on this, I would spend the money on that. But the question I would have for the other candidates, what wouldn't you have spent the money on? Like we hear, oh, you should have spent more money on climate than $5 million. Well, what would you have taken away out of our plan? And lay out all of the amounts of money that you would have designated for different things, and what wouldn't you have done? Because I think that we need to be real that all of this is about decisions, and you can't just say I would have put more in something without saying, but I'm going to take away from this other thing that people care about. I think this is a Connecticut, for folks that have not been in Connecticut for a long time, is one of the most segregated states in the nation, and it is shameful. It is shameful that we are that way. We are that way in our schools. We are that way in our housing. And a lot of our suburban partners, and I've been very, very vocal on the state level on this, refuse to welcome any affordable housing development, actively fight for affordable housing, against affordable housing, actively fight against any sort of integration in education. And we've had some real public fights about it. I have also been very vocal to push for laws at the state level to require suburban towns to open themselves up to affordable housing. And I think that is an area where we can see progress. We have seen some movement gaining over time around pushing and requiring our suburban partners to allow for more affordable housing. The second thing is on education, where I think that we can make more of a push to integrate our education systems. And we have made a lot of progress. When I took over as mayor, for years and years and years, people said the state should increase its funding to New Haven through the payment in lieu of taxes, and it never happened. We, because of our collaboration with a lot of other municipal leaders, saw our funding in New Haven go from $41 million annually to $90 million annually, because we work collaboratively with other mayors. I had a group meeting with other mayors just last week.
Thank you, Justin.
Collaboration with other folks.
Jacob, this is a great question. So, and for those of you, just a little basis, New Haven here generates the wealth for this whole region. Like, most of the jobs are here. We create the wealth. Most of the people who have jobs in the region of New Haven having jobs that are generated from our city. Then that wealth is often extracted out to these suburbs, which can fully fund their schools and have lots of taxable land, and then have very restrictive zoning codes that don't allow people to move into there. So this presents tons of problems. And I think this is what I was talking about before, thinking about our long-term goals and our long-term goals with the university. And you were asking about partnerships, Jacob. I think we should make it clear and really, really advocate. The university should understand that it is in their long-term goal. It is in their long-term interest to allow cities and towns to have other sources of revenue, such as sales or income tax. If we were able to have sales or income taxes, people who worked here in New Haven or whose jobs were based here in New Haven would pay some tax into our city services, because we provide services every day. Our population explodes every day during the daytime. Or if we had sales tax, anyone who sells things here, buys or sells things here in New Haven, they would pay into that as well. And so we would share that burden as is proper, because we live in a region that is mutually needs each other. In the meantime, the question of what mayors can do, we can be much more creative. We see this problem. One of the places we see this problem is in the housing market. So we have these out-of-state landlords that are like buying up properties and extracting all the wealth. Well, we have a residential licensing program that's not fully working. It's not licensing as many properties as it needs to be, but we fought a Supreme Court case for the power to do that. That's a way to claw back some of that money. And there's things called user fees, which we can impose on certain activities on people, regardless of whether they live here or not, in which we can reclaim some money here for the city, and we should be doing it. And I see my time's up.
I'm sorry, I keep coughing. I'm getting over COVID. I've tested negative a lot of times. So great ideas about creative revenue streams, right? Great ideas. We should be doing them. We did an analysis of what are the priorities, because in government, in local government, it is all about your capacity to implement. And we looked at how much money would we have if we pushed the state to have an increase in the sales tax that would go directly to cities instead of what currently happens to go to state. Airbnb, what if we had a user fee for Airbnb? Ride shares like some other municipalities do. And it's a fraction of the money that we would get compared to the push Yale University and compared to the push on increasing pilot, compared to the push this last year where we got a significant increase from the state for education funding through the education cost share. That is how we have focused our efforts. These other things on the list, but way down, because you're talking about $100,000 here, $100,000 there. I don't want to turn my back on $100,000, but when it comes to $49 million, I'm going to focus on that first.
Great, thanks, Justin. And just to clarify for everyone, I believe pilot is payment in lieu of taxes. Okay.
Correct.
Great.
Decent segue. Connecticut is very segregated, but so is New Haven. Internal to the city itself, its neighborhoods are segregated, and our schools, both public and private, are highly segregated. We know that integrated schools benefit all students. We know that well-off children from well-off families tend to do well no matter where they go to school. It doesn't really matter where they go. We know that low-income students benefit disproportionately from integrated schools, schools that are integrated by race and by class. And I know you guys know this because you guys send your kids to diverse public schools. But most people in the city who share your and my race and class demographic information do not. The majority of the members of the Board of Ed in New Haven are appointed by the mayor. The mayor has got a lot to say and do about a vision for public schools in this city. And it's sort of a somewhat wide open question. What's the message that you would send to those parents who are choosing not to send their children to integrated, diverse, truly inclusionary public schools, and what's the vision you would describe for our schools, both to serve their children who they choose not to send to those schools today, and to serve all children in the city?
And this will be the last question before we go to the. Mr. Liam's.
Anika, can we just, what's the message you would send to those parents who choose not to? And then what was the second part of the question?
What's the vision for serving all children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I grew up going to integrated schools, and it was something that I found to be like one of the most impactful formative experiences of my life. I happened to live in a neighborhood where people didn't think a lot of white people were living, and nobody, when I was in middle school, would nobody really would see me walking home and would have a lot of things to say from all sorts of directions. But it was really, really, really important to me for my children to have that experience as well, because I think it also helped form a basis for just relationships and for understanding the world and for understanding things beyond myself. And so I think what I would say to other parents, and what I do say to other parents, is that there is so much more to learning than just the academic environment, and cite all the statistics that you cite, but also just talk about the experience, because it is stories that move us, and the experience of life that moves us. And I think the feeling that I get, the enrichment that my children get, is so important, and it's so important to the people that they are becoming. That's how I would speak to people about that. I think vision for our schools is really important. I think our school system suffers from certain things that other towns have and we do not have. And I think we as a school system, as a Board of Ed, need to state that there are certain big goals that we want, and we need to put price tags on them so that we can eventually move the system in that direction. The things I would cite are universal pre-K. It's one of the big things that cut down on the achievement gap. We don't have it in New Haven. Smaller class sizes so that teachers can have more individualized attention to students. And in the long term, the best paid teachers in the region. Like, we need to say that to attract and retain staff.
So the two questions, number one, I would say that we need to underscore that our schools are good, right? We've got a lot of challenges in our schools, but our schools are good. Your child's success is much more correlated to your economic situation than the schools. And the reality is we had a lot more work to do there, but I send my wife and I send my child, our children, kindergarten and eighth grade or fourth grade. Sorry, she's 8. To Fame, which is on Grand Avenue, New Haven. We have loved it. Our teachers deeply care about our kids. They communicate with us. They work hard, and they do that for every child in their classrooms. So number one, our schools are good. We have more work to do, but our schools are good. Number two, the vision is every child needs to have an opportunity to thrive. And I really think, and there's a lot we could talk about policy here. I really think it's important. There's a lot of people that have social and economic capital in this room. And you, at some point, if you don't already have children, will have a choice yourselves on whether to move to the suburbs because of the schools are quote unquote good and send your kids to a school where everyone else looks the same primarily and has the same economic status, or you can choose to send your children to a school that doesn't have that kind of reputation. And if more of us choose to send our school to integrate with other schools, we can bring our resources to help uplift those schools. We're putting $3 million. We're going to announce this very shortly into early childhood education. We put $3 million into a tutoring initiative. We have a new superintendent that has hit the ground running and is just fantastic, focused on absenteeism and literacy as the main initiatives that we want to ensure our kids have right now. There's a lot more work that we need to do. Finally, and I know I'm done, but we need more money for our schools. We need to spend more money on our New Haven public schools kids, and that's the state that needs to do that work. We will continue to advocate for that.
I'm trying to formulate exactly what I want to say here, because Anika, you might know because you've been to some Board of Ed meetings too, and I think it is worth it. And this is what I would say to people: it is worth it, and it is important to put your kids in these schools, and to not segregate yourself, and to fully invest in the community. At the same time, because of that, we also can't ignore the problems that we have in the school system. And I do think a lot of times I don't know anybody here has attended Board of Ed meetings. We are worried so much about talking bad about the schools. What we were just hearing Justin saying, like the schools are good. We need to be honest about what the problems are, though. Sometimes, like, we have spent years not teaching the science of reading and not teaching phonics when the whole country has moved in that direction. And that's a huge problem. And it's been a huge loss for our students. And if we aren't upfront and honest about problems like that, we will never address them. And so much in this campaign I'm trying to do is get people to actually speak what we want to get done and say it so that we can reach those goals. And I think that we have to do that at the same time.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our moderators. Each of the moderators
was expecting to be able to ask one more question, but it's 8 o'clock, so we're going to open it up to the town hall. If anybody wants to ask a question, just line up, and if a bunch of people start lining up, we'll amend the timing stuff. And then in 30 minutes, you guys will have one more question, preferably the ones that were submitted online, because we promised those people to be able to ask those. Cool. I guess we'll just alternate sides.
I saw you in one.
As has been alluded, my name is Philip. I'm born and raised New Haven, and I love the city with all my heart. As has been alluded to here by the moderators and by the candidates, one of the biggest things city government can control to promote a healthy city is the price of housing and keeping it low. But one of the gravest threats to low-priced housing is restrictive zoning and keeping the supply of housing low. And so my question for both of you is how you're going to combat restrictive zoning in New Haven. And a specific example that I'd like to draw attention to is New Hallville has less restrictive zoning than the Everett Street and St. Ronan Street section of East Rock. And this seems to promote a lot of the inequalities along race and class lines that we certainly hope to eradicate in this country.
Who's going first? You just did the rebuttal.
I just did the rebuttal.
So am I first? I think this is a very important question, and we are making progress on this. We have proposed to the Board of Alders an MU zone, which is the first time that we have had a cap or a cap on parking and a density minimum. We're proposing this for the Long Wharf area, so we are leaning into the need for a lot more housing in the city. We passed, one of the first things that I did in my administration is tell our team to work on an inclusionary zoning code that will require all new developments to have a certain percentage of affordable housing. The Board of Alders worked with us to pass that, and now any new large development has a percentage of affordable housing. We implemented accessory dwelling unit ordinance that would allow getting more directly to a lot of these kind of single or slightly multifamily parcels in New Haven to add an additional, say, garage unit, basement unit. And this is where reality comes in, right? Because we proposed something that would allow these additional apartments, and the community and therefore some alders pushed back on it. So what we did was we decided to phase it out or phase it in. So the first phase was for homeowners to be able to implement ADUs, accessory dwelling units. The next phase, which we will introduce to the Board of Alders soon, will expand this to additional units. And I think it's easy for us to say on the sidelines, we should change our zoning, we should add different types of zoning, we should increase our density. But the actual work of engaging with the community and pushing these policies through that are beneficial for housing, in addition to a lot of other policies, the actual work is really hard to do. It takes a lot of collaboration, engagement, education with people. And we made a lot of progress, but we still have more work to do.
I think it's a huge issue what you're describing, Philip. I think as part of the Room for All Coalition, I'm still very involved with the Room for All Coalition, which has proposed a number of they proposed the inclusionary zoning measure that the mayor just mentioned years ago, and has pushed for a lot of these issues. I think we should be ending parking requirements. We know that those drive up the cost of housing, and like they are forced housing for cars when we could have more housing for people. If people want to choose to pay for that, they can. I know that it becomes very controversial and people push back about that, but we need leaders who are willing to lose elections over that, because the need for housing for people is more important. And so I think we need to reduce the minimum lot size requirements and reduce some of the side yard requirements. Like the fact that you have a side yard, you need to have a side yard just adds to the whole cost of everything. And so I think those are really big issues, and I think we can do them a lot faster too. We have declared a climate crisis, and we do have a climate emergency, and we do have emergency powers to do anything to reduce local carbon emissions. And the creation of local infill housing is one of the biggest policy interventions to reduce local carbon emissions. And so I think those powers were given to the alders. Declared the climate emergency. Like they said that there is an emergency. So they are saying we are giving emergency powers over to City Hall to do this. I think we should take them up on it. And that way we can also get the climate issue and the housing issue at the same time, because this is a crisis and we need to treat it like a crisis. And I know it will get some pushback, but we need to be clear what we're running on and what people are voting for when they're voting for the candidate, and then be willing to lose over it.
Can I respond to this? Yeah, so declaring a climate emergency doesn't mean we have emergency powers. We had emergency powers in COVID, but we do not have emergency powers to just have the mayor be a dictator and do a bunch of things. So let's just be clear about this. We're in law school here. I'm looking at Alder Sabin, who has worked very hard to push eliminating parking requirements. This is not about me losing an election or him losing an election. It is us actually getting something across the finish line, something that other legislators will support. And you could stand up here and say, we should eliminate parking requirements. And maybe people in the room nod their heads, but we cannot get that done immediately. We have to go incrementally, because otherwise nothing will get approved by the legislature. Let's be real about folks. We share the long-term goal here, but there's a difference between academics and practicality. We're making progress, we're chipping away, but let's be real with this.
My name is Zachary.
There's a button if you, it's not on.
Can you hear me? Oh, perfect. My name is Zachary Pan. I'm a freshman here and very new to the city. As someone who doesn't know much about this race, I was just wondering if you could share the biggest philosophical difference you have with your opponent in this race.
Zachary, what was I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. The biggest difference was
philosophical difference. Yeah, when it comes to this.
Okay. Well, I think you just heard a big difference. I mean, I do think we actually declared an emergency. Like, is there an emergency? Is there a climate emergency or is there not a climate emergency? There are emergency powers when we declare an emergency. That's what happens. And so, and that is not being a dictator. That is being clear about what you're elected for and what we are doing with our government powers. And so we can say, so what the problem I have with what's being done here is the alders are treating, or the government in general is treating this idea that there is a climate emergency as a nice thing that they're saying to the youth. The youth have demanded a climate emergency. Let's say it, but not take emergency steps to address it. Is it emergency? Yes. Should we do something about it? Yes. Are there emergency powers? Yes. There is the legal basis for that. It is completely legal. It is written out there in the ordinance. If we don't have effective local government, people will lose faith in it. And you know what? They already have. I think we need leadership that really thinks about how government hits people's lives, how we get them to believe that we're actually going to get things done and really make change here. We have the power to do it. We should use it.
I love we're in law school. So there's a formal declaration of an emergency. If I sign that document, the Board of Alders, 2/3 of it can vote and override it. And the second we eliminate parking requirements, the Board of Alders will override it. So this is not as easy as someone says it is. The main difference is a great question is about experience. I've been mayor for 4 years. There's around 1,300 city staff, in addition to the work that we're doing on the New Haven Public Schools side. And we have worked through some of the most challenging times our city has ever faced, through COVID, through an increase that we've seen across the nation in violence, through the struggles we have had to redefine what public safety means and implement some new programs like Elm City Compass, where people that are social workers help engage the community. We have struggled through very, very challenging times. We have managed crisis after crisis. And actually, New Haven is a better place now than it was 4 years ago. And if you talk with people around the community and get out in the community, you will hear that from many people. We have more work to do. And that's the first thing I say in pretty much every response. We have more work to do. We can't solve these problems overnight, but we are making a lot of progress.
I don't know that they'd overrule it. And I think that's a risk people need to take. And the question of experience is a really important one. I have been the director of a federal public corruption task force that oversaw all cases here in Connecticut of public corruption. I've run a statewide legal aid organization for the state, and I've launched an inspector general office in Hartford. Before becoming mayor, the mayor was the head of a local land trust that ran community gardens here in the city. I would hold up my experience to his experience before becoming mayor in front of anyone. I have also been deeply engaged in the community and pushing with community members for the reforms that we need to see. I've been on boards for housing issues, Junta for Progressive Action, Neighborhood Housing Services of New Haven, and the Room for All Coalition. There are people out there when you have those type of connections, to back you up on making these changes. We need to be more forward-leaning in making these changes to make government more effective.
So the last two people kind of stole my questions, but specifically on zone. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm Millen. I'm a sophomore in the college. My first question is, you've talked about zoning, about affordable housing. Specifically, would both of you two support more market rate housing, loosening the zoning laws to allow more market rate housing? Second, what are each of you going to do if you're mayor to address learning loss post-pandemic? Because I heard that's a really serious issue. I'm really concerned about it.
Justin, you.
Okay. Just to be clear, we shouldn't be comparing the Liam Brennan of today to the Justin Elicker 4 years ago. I've been mayor for 4 years. Let's be real about who has the different experience. The market rate housing. So we don't need to change the zoning laws to incentivize market rate housing in the city. There's a lot of market rate housing that is being built right now. I do think that we need to lean into having more development in general. And so by changing the density to have minimum density, not only are we going to incentivize more market rate housing, but we're going to have a large percentage of inclusionary, because of our inclusionary zoning code, affordable units as well. So overall, we need more supply in the system. Some of that is market rate housing to kind of alleviate some of the pressure on the demands, but also the benefit and what we're really leaning into is more affordable housing. Your second question on learning loss. So we were already behind before the pandemic started. So we have a lot of work to do, and we should not accept that pre-pandemic level. We have embraced the science of reading. We've piloted a number of different curriculums, and the new superintendent has jumped into this full on. We are partnering with New Haven Reads, the United Way, and other entities to do a tutoring program. I myself tutored a kid this summer. It was a great experience, and we have seen the initial results of that. Our students' tests that have been part of that program have gone up as well. As I said earlier, we're investing in early childhood education because there's a lot of research that shows, and we already have a very expansive early childhood education program in New Haven, but we want to expand it. A lot of research that shows that you invest in kids early on, their achievement rates are likely to increase pretty dramatically in the future. And one more thing I'd add is that we are constructing new youth and community centers to increase the amount of youth engagement outside of schools to make sure that our kids have productive things to do, not just in schools, but outside as well.
Okay. What was your name again? Sorry.
Millen, rhymes with Dylan.
Millen. Hey, nice to meet you, Millen. Millen, great question. Market rate housing is, it depends on what market we're talking about, right? And so the zoning code can really affect what market we have out there and where the market comes out. So when we're here in New Haven, often when people talk about market rate housing, they're thinking just of the big developments and like this kind of Texas donut style stuff that we see downtown, which are like somewhat gated communities within the city and have pools and gyms and all that stuff. But if we change the zoning code or we make it possible to build other types of housing, that will hit a market at a lower price point. When you work on this issue, there is what's called naturally affordable housing. And so the production and loosening zoning code to allow for more naturally affordable housing is really important. And that really can take the pressure off and add to the affordable housing stock. And one that's really that hits a lot of needs, because if we just think of subsidized housing as affordable housing, if it's federally subsidized, it comes with tons of restrictions that many people can't get access to. So if you're a returning citizen from prison, you can't get access to that housing, but naturally affordable housing you can. And we have that issue. It's a big issue here in New Haven. So using the zoning code to unleash the power of that is hugely important. And in terms of learning loss, I think one of the biggest things is like building a really strong and successful system. And I mentioned before, making it a goal to have universal pre-K. I know that's not the people who've had loss because they're just coming into the system, but thinking about learning long term, but then also attracting and retaining teachers. And then what I was saying before about having a goal of having them be the best paid in the region. They do have the toughest job in the region. They should be the best paid in the region. We need to start moving or having a goal, moving money in that direction. That was the time. That's the time sign.
That's the.
Oh, that's second. Then I would just say, just on the experience thing, then I'm sure the mayor's not saying that only the mayor has the experience to be mayor. So I think you can compare experience fairly. Thank you.
Sure. Just to be clear, returning citizens can access affordable housing. So I don't want that to get out there as it's not accurate statement. And agreed about, so in addition to, we have brought on over 900 units of affordable or deeply affordable, either renovated or new units over these past 4 years. An additional 900 are in the pipeline. We're looking into the concept of tiny houses to the point of naturally affordable housing in certain types of lots where people can have smaller houses, but they're actually much more affordable and appropriate for certain individuals. We have created a land bank and put $5 million towards that initiative so that we can start to play a more active role in acquiring strategic properties before absentee landlords do as well. I see you waving.
Hi, my name is Carl. I'm also new to New Haven. We moved here from Virginia to support my wife in her PhD program. Thus far, I really enjoyed living here. It's a very walkable, very bikeable community. I'm able to walk to the train to get to work. My kids can walk to school. My wife, of course, can walk to class. But the one thing we noticed that's missing are scooters, bike share program, any type of micro mobility. Wondering what you all thought about that, and also mass transit. I mean, CT transit is great, but have you all thought of something bigger and larger, to connect New Haven with some of the other surrounding communities?
Thanks, Carl. Great question. We did have a bike share program here a few years ago. It died right at I think at the pandemic time. The parking authority is looking to launch a new one, which I think could be really useful. I think facilitating that is having more bike infrastructure. I think we need to invest a lot more in bike infrastructure. And as I mentioned, probably we need to do it more quickly so that it induces people to actually use those facilities more. I don't know. I think it would be very helpful to have scooters. There's a lot of people you see using their private scooters around, and Hartford has scooters out and around town. I think that could really add to our overall kind of climate resiliency here as well, and other mobility options. In terms of the transit, huge problem and a huge issue. I think when we had free buses, I was really hopeful that that was going to stay, because I think if we had free buses, it's a lot easier for the city to supplement that system. Because what we really need, the bus system right currently now goes into the green and everything hubs out from the green. And what we really need is like kind of like a circle line that goes around, so people don't have to travel all the way to the green if they're trying to go somewhere else. So people who have jobs like in Milford may have to go to the green sometimes to get out to Milford on the bus if they're taking the bus. And it'd be really great. The city can, if it has the funds, but if we could find funds in various ways, fund its own transportation. A few years ago, in the early 2000s, we had a free trolley that rolled around downtown, which people could hop on and off, and we could theoretically do that to supplement the bus system. And I think it's something that the government should really look into. Even with the transfer issue, I think there'd be a way to get around. You'd probably get the transfer, ride the free thing, and then use the transfer on the next bus. But yeah.
So the state passed legislation this past session, and I was standing with a lot of the state legislators to advocate for this, supported the expansion of micromobility. There's actually an incredible incentive program for New Haven residents to get, I think it's $1,500. We double checked the facts on the exact number, off of an electric bike. So I encourage you to take advantage of it. New Haven actually had the most applicants across the state for that program. We're really leaning into micromobility. We're also looking at, and we've talked with some private companies about the scooters, and adopting a municipal program for people to use scooters around the city to get around. Public transportation. So we have jointly partnered with the state on bus rapid transit. It is a several $100 million project that will take some time to do. Whaley Avenue, Dixwell Avenue, Grand Avenue, Columbus Avenue, all will have bus rapid transit on it, which if you're not familiar with it, there's a number of other cities around the nation that have used this. The buses trigger the lights, so the buses go a lot faster because they get the green lights. They don't stop as frequently, so people can use them to get to their destination much, much faster. And they're on these strategic corridors that have a lot of, number one, people that need to go to work. Number two, they're corridors where there's frankly not a lot of historical wealth. So the idea is to have access to people for jobs that really need that additional transportation. We're implementing a lot more infrastructure for bike and pedestrian safety. The state finally has approved red light cameras in the city, or the ability of cities to install red light cameras. And so we will be installing, working with the Board of Alders, because we will need their approval in the future, next year, red light cameras to ensure there's more enforcement as well.
1 minute to Rebecca.
I just want to follow up that I think, I'm glad you feel very comfortable walking around, and I think, and that you feel very comfortable biking around. I do too. But I personally was like hit by cars twice on Edgewood Avenue coming downtown before. And for years have been advocating for a bike lane there, which is in the process of being done. It's halfway done right now. It's been halfway done for a year and a half, and the new outline for the last bit is out there now, and so it should be finished hopefully sometime soon. But I think really investing in that sort of infrastructure and doing it fast and thinking about how it hits people's lives, most importantly, because right now with just the halfway mark, nobody's going to use it. It's not going to induce anyone new to use that lane if they're just getting dropped halfway to downtown. They need to be able to make it all the way to downtown for it to be functional. And the fact that like when you have a project like that sits like that, it kind of builds a distrust in government. And so I think we really need to think about that with infrastructure investments.
Hello.
My name is Raymond. I'm a first-year law student here. Thank you both for coming to speak to this community. I'm glad to be in this room asking questions instead of being asked questions without notice by. So recently there was a issue with the Yale Police Union putting up flyers that frankly lied about the situation of public safety in this community. So I'm wondering, my question is, how should City Hall view its relationship with the police force here?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for raising the issue. This is an example where Yale and the city stood together. Let's be clear. So Yale Police Union passed out flyers that were inflammatory and lying about the state of public safety in New Haven. And leadership at Yale and I and my police chief stood together to condemn that. So I think it's a really good example of that collaboration. Yale Police has the authority as a police force given to it by the city of New Haven to operate in the city. There's parameters around the work that they do here. So there's somewhat of a different question depending on who you're talking about. We have done a lot of work on police accountability. And one thing that you will hear over and over in this community is that people want more beat cops. They want more cops walking the beat, but they want accountability. It's not a point of pride that we have fired 9 officers in this past year. It is not a point of pride, but it is underscoring that we, new Chief Jacobson, our team is holding officers accountable. The internal affairs complaints that we are receiving has pretty significantly decreased, and generally the community is feeling more confident in the engagement with the police. We've implemented a lot of new training across the board as well, duty to intervene training, so an officer can engage another officer if they see that officer potentially not following policy or doing something that they should not be doing. Officers also are trained on de-escalation techniques so that they can reduce a tense incident. Finally, Elm City Compass is a program that we have created where people call 911, and if it's a suicidal person, and if it is someone that is dealing with, for example, a substance use disorder, the issue that is not violent, instead of the police going, we send a social worker and a person with lived experience to provide resources. This program was piloted and is expanding and is very, very successful in the city.
So this flyer that was passed out was ridiculous. And it was apparently a negotiating tactic that the police union here at Yale was using to try and influence their contract, which is even more inflammatory, that they were kind of creating a stir of hysteria, or trying to create some sort of stir of hysteria, lying about the city as a way to strong arm the university to get whatever they're looking for, more money, more benefits. But it points to a real systemic problem that we have here, that having a private police force simultaneously in the city. I mean, I think I have no plans to deal with it immediately. I think we have a lot more other issues to deal with first, but I do think, as I've mentioned before, that naming this issue is really important. Like, this university running a private police force within the city of New Haven that doesn't have democratic oversight from the city government is a problem. It is anti-democratic, and it creates a system that shouldn't function within our city bounds. Thinking about for police forces in general, we also, I know there has been an increase in we need more police accountability. I think the system of internal affairs that exists doesn't work. This is having police officers investigate themselves. So folks who are your colleagues, you then have to investigate them. And then a few months later, you might work on them. So just to tell you how this works, I had a case where literally one of the officers who was in the videos we were investigating was now sitting in internal affairs next to the other internal affairs officers. That system does not work. And so we have to come up with better systems. We can have an inspector general system without a police force if we have without a police internal affairs system with a functioning civilian review board. And that means giving support and guidance to the civilian review board, getting it up and working, and having an inspector general position.
Sure. So I think it's important to know, does the other candidate want to eliminate Yale Police? And if that's the case, it was kind of alluding to that. If that's the case, then people should know that. I don't support eliminating Yale Police. They dramatically increase our capacity in the city, and they have a very kind of restrictive purview in the city. So I think we need to be real. We have a police accountability, we have a civilian review board, we're doing some things to improve it. It was created about 2 years ago, and we all can agree that it needs some improvement. We're looking at authorizing them to potentially hire an inspector, like a paid person to help manage through that. Final thing, specific to that flyer, get out into New Haven, get out into our neighborhoods. Our city is overwhelmingly safe. We've got challenges around public safety, but do not be afraid to engage in our community and get into the neighborhoods. You will benefit yourselves, and our community will benefit from engaging with you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This will be our last town hall question. Now,
this is Karis, my question is a follow-up to the discussion of the previous one. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on how current policy is influencing the whole public safety situation in New Haven, and what kind of adjustment you would make to facilitate a healthier relationship between students of Yale and the general public of New Haven, that does not operate from a perspective of fear. And this question was brought to my attention during my orientation at School of Management, because one of the new international students was mugged and physically attacked on his first day, and we all couldn't believe it. And then the police quickly took action, looked into it, and discovered that it was a group of teenagers, a gang of teenagers that mugged pedestrians multiple times that night, and they were later arrested. But the problem here is I later learned from second years that there's a adjustment to the law enforcement that says that for anyone who didn't commit like a serious crime before they're 18, it's not going to go on their record, and that contributed to the recent uptick in like underage crime. I would like to confirm that with you, whether that's true or not, and if it's true, how can we move away from the current situation and make decision from the point of empathy?
Liam, you're starting.
Sure. Karis, is that your name? Karis, thank you so much for your question, Karis. And Karis, I think I'll try and work backwards, I think, on that one. I don't think that that's true. That not having criminal conduct on your record is incentivizing an uptick in this activity. I think for that to be true, you would have to think that people are sitting around rationally thinking, should I do this? This is going to be on my record forever, or should I not do this? I think it's more like everything else will tell us that it's more like peer pressure, social engagements, like other opportunities that folks have that probably create the environment in which someone, if this occurred, and if it were teenagers who did this, would act in this way. So first off, is that true? I would say I don't think so. No. Second, I think it is really important not to operate from a place of fear. I think it's great that you're wondering about that. And I think I would encourage you to embrace the city wholeheartedly. I think when I was here in law school, I fell in love with the city. I thought it was great. There are so many opportunities here. There's so many wonderful people, and people are really excited to meet you too. If anyone shows an interest in the city and engaging in the city, the residents respond because they want to be loved, and they want the city to be loved because they love the city as well. And so I think the world is wide open for that, and so I think you should be open to that, and I would encourage all the students to be open to that and do that. I think and I think the city needs to then take an issue at looking at the root causes of why youth might be engaging in these activities, if it was actually youth who this occurred to. I see.
Sure. So big picture, we're doing a lot to improve public safety in the city. We're implementing a multi-pronged approach that has everything from increased technology. We put a lot of cameras around the city to help with accountability and catching people that are engaged in some of the most significant violence. Every officer that comes through the academy walks the beat for a year, so we're working to put more beat cops out in the community. We have expanded a number of our violence interruption programs to engage with the most at-risk people and settle things down, because oftentimes people will have a dispute because they're angry with one another. And so we've expanded some of those programs. We've opened a reentry welcome center to engage our returning citizens. They're dropped off in front of our reentry welcome center to provide resources. And most importantly, we're investing a lot more in the community. We talked about American Rescue Plan funds, and that's everything from expanded youth programming to expanded job training and entrepreneurial training in the community. I think that what's important is underscoring we live in a city, so we have to be cautious, but we should not run on fear. Because the reality is you get an email from the chief of Yale Police, and that goes to everyone every time there's an incident. And you think about the number of emails you get and the thousands and thousands and thousands of Yale affiliated people in the city. And the reality is that there is not that many incidents. And that's not to say that our goal shouldn't be no incidents, but I think that we need to keep that in mind. We need to set the tone for each other and push the university to not push a narrative of fear. We need to get out into the community, be more active, and we need more eyes on the street, period. Because if there's more people engaged out in the street, you're less likely to see these kind of incidents as well. So lean into it, embrace our city, and don't feel afraid.
Sure. I mean, I would agree with a lot of what Justin said there. And I think one of the things that was really interesting tying this back, so you before to the other question, one of the things that you saw that the union tried to say to people is don't go outside, don't be outside. If we all retreat into our homes, that makes the situation much worse. Eyes on the street, folks being outside is really important. It's one of the best deterrents, and engaging people directly is one of the best deterrents. I think as a city, we also need to think about engaging youth and more youth opportunities. You know, we have to invest a lot more. Our parks have been unloved lately, and we need to invest a lot more in our parks so that we can have more sports opportunities, more arts opportunities for youth, more programming after school so they have other things to do. And then I think this is not for the mugging, but we really need to do a lot better and more complex investigations of the gun pipeline, because the real thing, you're pretty much safe. Like you said, statistically, you're fine, but we do have a problem with illegal guns being dumped into the city.
I just have a quick response, if that's okay. The general sentiment shared, at least at the School of Management, is the student body does not want to operate on the basis of fear, and we want to engage actively with the community. Some lady from the development board came over and shared about the reading program, and a lot of students signed up to be tutors to promote literacy, and we would love to do that. But at the same time, I think we are facing the current challenge of an uptick in underage crime, and I think it's worth looking into it for sure.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who asked a question.
Yeah.
And if somebody else asks your question, just cross it out. And maybe let's keep these to 90 seconds as opposed to 2 minutes. Is that all right with everybody? And still, let's say 45 seconds for rebuttal rather than a minute. Cool. Someone else want to go first?
I'll go first. It's fine. So these are from questions that were submitted online. I don't think any of us could probably resist putting our own spin on them, so I won't resist that. Tweed Airport. So this has long been a thorn in the side of candidates for office in New Haven, because Tweed is generally acknowledged to be important to the city's economic development, but it exists. It is in a neighborhood that's very white and has a high voter turnout rate. A middle ground that candidates have often paved is, I don't know how I feel about Tweed. Let's think about it some more. An environmental review, I've noticed there's a couple of YIMBYs in the room. Environmental review, they'll probably be aware is a mechanism by which to pretend to investigate a project, but actually end it. You all have staked out different positions on Tweed. I'll let you tell the room what they are. But with that context, Justin, what would you say to folks living near the airport who really are impacted by the expansion? I don't think there's no impact on that neighborhood. And Liam, what would you say to folks in the rest of the city who enjoy the economic benefits of expanding the airport and in the region?
I'm first, right? Tweed New Haven Airport has been not reaching its potential for a long time. The city is required to subsidize it with $1 million approximately annually. And about 2 years ago, we saw an opportunity to actually have the airport be operational. And since then, we have come to an agreement with the operating company and the investor that has dramatically increased the number of flights that are going. Important, it has created several hundred jobs that are working class jobs. It is accessible financially to so many more people because the flights are actually relatively inexpensive. We just announced a new flight a couple of weeks ago to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and people were going crazy because it's an affordable option for people. The neighborhood has had some understandably growing pains. What I have heard consistently from the neighborhood is, number one, city subsidizes the airport. We want to eliminate subsidy. The deal, we no longer pay $1 to subsidize Tweed. Traffic is a challenge. And we have not only put a lot of traffic calming in, but the goal is that we will move the terminal to the other side, the East Haven side, which is much more appropriate for commercial traffic that will basically address a lot of the traffic issues there. Climate and sea level rise. So as a part of the proposed change, we will expand capacity for water holding on the site so that it actually improves the situation for flooding in the neighborhood. And that is something that will actually improve the situation around sea level rise. And there's a couple more things I could cover because it's a really complicated topic, but I have 90 seconds. I got more time?
No, that was the.
Okay.
Yep. So the basic outline is this airport is there. It used to have a bunch of propeller planes that would fly it to, like, when I was in law school, like, people were going to DC and New York, and then they transferred to a bigger plane and go off from there. All right. There's an expansion that's occurring. Now, before the expansion occurred, we've had this Avello that Justin's talking about come in and have bigger jet flights coming out. They're very inexpensive. They give a lot of opportunity for people to travel elsewhere, mostly to vacation destinations. At the same time, so what Anika was alluding to too, then, is environmental impact statements and environmental reviews, which are usually used as tools to stop housing. And I kind of does make my brain want to boil most of the time. In the instances, though, of things like factories, dumps, highways, and airports, I actually think this is something that's really important. Assessing the environmental impact of those sorts of developments, which are going to be generational changes, is something that we need to do. And residents there, all they are offhand calling for is an environmental impact statement from the EPA. I do support that. Now, the Chamber of Commerce here in New Haven opposes it because they say they think it will torpedo the growth of the airport and the expansion. That's very telling. That means they think that the environmental impacts of that are so bad that it will destroy the expansion deal. If that's the truth, that's something we as the public need to know. It is one of the densest areas in the state, maybe not in Connecticut, but maybe not in New Haven, but in the state, and it has a huge impact on the people's lives there.
So Anika said this is a high voting district, and Mr. Brennan is trying to thread the needle of not offending people and not taking a position on the airport. People are calling for an environmental impact statement, a small group of people, because they want to delay the movement of the terminal to the East Haven side and the expansion of the airport. That is why they're calling for that. And Mr. Brennan is taking a position where you don't know if he supports this expansion of the airport. You don't know if he wants Avella to operate on the airport or not, because he's trying to thread the needle and not lose those votes. This is about leadership. It's about being clear about what our position is. And I am clear on what my position is.
Great.
Yeah, sure. I'll go.
Okay, great.
Another one of the questions submitted online. Are there quality of life issues you think need attention in the downtown area? For example, broken parking meters, panhandling, assistance to homeless people on the green. And we'll note I recently interviewed and wrote an article about a number of people who have pitched tents on the green around Temple and Elm, who are sleeping there for a variety of reasons. But there is a now kind of more visible kind of camping presence on the green. And so I wonder
whoever is supposed to start now, talk about quality of life issues downtown, particularly in relation to homelessness and the green.
Yeah, the green is our welcome center. I mean, it is the big, open, beautiful space that we have in the middle of the city, and I think it is something that we really need to cultivate and invest in. I think upkeep of the green is really important in terms of like what the state of the green is in. I do think we have the green also serves as a transportation hub, and we see a lot of people. We have buses dropping off people there and buses picking up people there, and we often see people drinking openly, smoking openly, and that's a real problem. I think I have very forward-leaning issues on drug policy and how we should be addressing drugs, but I think we should be, if people are drinking or doing drugs on the green, we should have enforcement there and be confiscating those materials and stopping that activity on the green, because it really affects everyone else's quality of life. And so I think the fact that we are not doing that, and we're seeing similar activity in 9th Square as well, and other parts of town, it deters other people from being in those public spaces and makes them less of public spaces, and then they become privatized spaces for only certain members of the public. So I think there are significant quality of life issues there, and I think the city can do a better job of addressing them.
Yeah, so we don't arrest people for public drinking, public smoking. We don't arrest drug users. And we have Elm City Compass that engages with people. We have a lot of other nonprofit partners that engage with people, that provide resources. That is the way that we need to work to address these challenges. And we are working very hard, in particular, this question is focused on homelessness, to respond to an increase in homelessness that cities around the nation, including New Haven, are experiencing right now. The Board of Aldermen is currently reviewing a proposal of mine for the city to purchase a hotel that will add 112 new beds, emergency beds. A hotel is a much more appropriate way to help support people stabilizing, because they have privacy, they have security, because they have their own space to store some of their things. And it allows for people, for example, with a partner, with a pet, to have a space where our congregate shelters currently don't have that. I'm optimistic the Board of Aldermen will approve that. In addition, we've expanded a lot of other services. We have drop-in centers around the city where people can go and use the laundry, where people can go take a shower. We've started Power in the Shower, and you will see it. It was just out on the green today. It's out there once a week, where people can go and take a shower, because one of the things that we have heard, among a lot of things from people experiencing homelessness, is they want a place where they can take a shower. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done here, but we are doing a lot, and we can be proud in New Haven that New Haven does the most of any municipality in the state for individuals experiencing homelessness.
45 seconds to respond.
Thanks. I do think the expansion of homeless shelters is really important. I think we need more beds, and we need a more variety of options for people. But I do think fundamentally also that homelessness is a housing issue. And I think what we're seeing right now is the rise in rents and the housing problems that we have. And I think we don't have enough of a diversity of options of housing under our current code. And that's where I really think pushing on reforming the code to allow for many different types of housing options here in New Haven could really help create a supply that meets the needs of people experiencing homelessness, and give more options.
And this will be our last question.
Yes. Well, and actually this got alluded to up front, so I thought it was very important to ask.
It's getting easier, Jacob. Come on.
No, this is very, Justin. In 2013, after losing the Democratic primary to incumbent Tony Hart, you ran in the general election as an independent. So this question is for both you and Liam. If you are unsuccessful come Tuesday, will you run in the general election? And if the answer is yes, how do you justify doing that, given that your party's own voters will have said that you should not be mayor?
Who's going first?
Okay,
so I am a Democrat. I've been a Democrat for all my adult life, and I'm proud to have received the endorsement of the Working Families Party as well. So my name will be on the ballot under the Working Families Party line in November. And should I not lose or not win the primary, I will be proud to be on the Working Families line in November.
Okay, so I'm running the primary. I'm making the stand in the primary. I think this is where I think this is the best bet. It's the best option. I am a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life. And I think the best way, I think my goal with this campaign is to win and to make real change here in New Haven. As a secondary goal, I think we can really shape the conversation here in New Haven and the changes that we want to see by shaping the conversation. And I think that is best done looking at New Haven, knowing how New Haven operates through the Democratic Party and through the primary process. And I have no intention to run in the general if I don't win the primary. But I will be at Rudy's this evening at 9 p.m. for a meet and greet. If any of y'all would like to join us and come out right after this, and we can talk more about all this. But I really appreciate you all coming out. Those of you who are residents of New Haven, I hope you register in the Democratic Party and register to vote. And we will be voting on Tuesday for the primary election.
I don't know if that really requires a rebuttal. Justin, would you like to hear about that now? Campaign events?
We're not allowed to, right? Do we have closing remarks, or is this it? Is it?
You don't have closing remarks, but you have 45 seconds to rebut.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to rebut, but I have advice for Yale students. I was a Yale student. Choose one thing to do to engage in the community, because a lot of Yale students are like, I want to do everything, and then you don't engage deeply in anything, and it's kind of a disrespect to the community because people start to engage with you, and then you're so busy that you have intentions to do good things, but you end up not doing it. So do one thing, and the second piece of advice is do everything. And what I mean by that is experience New Haven. New Haven is not just about pizza, and it's not just about Pepe's and Sally's, but there's lots of other awesome pizza places. But experience East Rock Park, experience West Rock Park, experience the Long Island Sound. There's so much. Final thing, my cell phone is 203-500-2969. 203-500-2969. Don't abuse it. But if you need something, if you want to talk briefly, I try to get back to everyone, and I want to help. Welcome to New Haven.
Thank you.
I think right now, if you're over the age of 21, you can go to the J-Reg Kegger, or you can go to Rudy's. The J-Regger? Yeah, besides that, just thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for asking questions. The Yale Law Democrats will continue to have events throughout the year. So if you want to stay informed with what we're doing, just sign up on Yale Connect and you'll get all our notifications. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much for that.
That's a good answer.
I'm gonna ask one of the question askers a question. I'll be back.
Yeah, I will take your time.
Thank you, Scott.
My term is up.